Okay, we are recording right now. Okay, so hi, welcome to the webinar. And I'm gonna start out by sharing, like going through the agenda briefly. So we're gonna start by, welcoming y'all and brief introduction to the presenter here, like Shane and Joanna. And then we're gonna go through the role of PLOS Academic Editor, which is you, like, what it entails. And then we're gonna have Q&A session where you can ask questions, and then we'll have the closing, and then we will have breakout room where you can meet other members as well. All right, so introduction. My name is Shane. I am from Editorial Board Service, and my role is to support you, like as editorial board member, like we want you to have a good experience on our editorial board as well. So my role is to like support you to have positive experience, and I'm gonna pass it to my colleague, Joanna.
Hi everyone. So my name is Joanna and I'm one of the staff editors. So I work predominantly on PLOS One within the physical sciences and engineering. So any of you who are working in those sorts of fields, you're most likely to have contact with me, but I also help out on some of the other mega journals as well, particularly climate and water. And my role is a bit more varied, and I work with handling some of the manuscripts as well. So if I speak with academic editors, if we have any particular concerns or questions about a manuscript, we might reach out. Equally, we might answer some questions you might have about manuscripts if you were to email into the journal office. And I also speak with authors as well. So that's kind of my main day-to-day, is kind of a bit more involved with the manuscripts themselves and answering queries.
Yeah. Thank you, Joanna. Yeah, so we're gonna turn to you. We would like to get to know you more. So I'm gonna start a poll that have, like some of the questions of like your background, like your editorial board experience, and like, your geographical location. So I'm gonna start a poll. Yep. And then like, can you see the poll right now? Okay, yeah, I'm gonna give like a minute and see. Oh wow, a lot of quite a widespread group we got here. Yeah, a lot from North America and Europe, which makes sense, I guess, given the time right now. Yeah, we have a lot of senior members. Be cool. Okay, I think the answers are kind of tapering out, so I'm just gonna end the poll. Yeah, and I can share the results here, right? Like, so you can see, yeah, majority of us are from PLOS One, which makes sense. It's like a big journal, and a lot of you are from like Europe and North America, and then really senior researchers. And yeah, wow, you have a lot of great experience for editorial board. And we don't have any Antarctica. So if you know any researcher from Antarctica, like please recommend it to us. We never have any AE from Antarctica yet. So, all right, that's really cool to see. Thank you. All right, so I'm just gonna dive in. So the PLOS editorial board tend to be diverse, like in geography, like as you see, right, like in career stage and subject area to reflect what we publish in our journals. And if you are curious about who else is on the editorial board, in your journal or like any other journals, right, like they are links that you can go here. There are links here. And I will just quickly show you what PLOS One look like right now. So like these are all the academic editor that we have on PLOS One editorial board, and then you can search them based on name, I believe institution. Oh no, I don't think you can search by institution. I think like by country, definitely by sessions or like classification, right? So for example, like anthropology, right? Like let's see who has anthropology classification in their profile, and then you can see like, we have like a good group of like anthropology experts on our editorial board. So like you can just, peruse like if you are interested in it. So we have a session editor and academic editor on our editorial board. So session editors serve like an advisory role, and they advise on like subject specific issue or like manuscript specific issues. And also like they participate on a deeper level of the session engagement. And then the academic editor role, which is you oversee the entire peer review process and are responsible for determining what we like publish in the end. So a little bit about recruitment process, like most of the recruitment come from applications, which I believe like, many of you come through applications, and then or like subject specific invitation if we need, particular subject area need for academic editor, we will send out like, invitation to join editorial board or like, referral. So like we really value real referral. Like if you have any colleague that you think it might be suitable for our editorial board, like please refer it to us and we will look at the applications. All right. So what does the academic editor role entail? So as I said, right, like you are responsible for overseeing the peer review process from beginning to end, and that include conducting the initial assessment based on the PLOS publication criteria, finding and inviting reviewers, and then you will evaluate their feedback from the reviewers and make editorial decision based on that, and then you will be communicating decision to the author. So you play an active role in our community, and you are the representative of PLOS as an editorial board members. So at PLOS, we take our publication ethic very seriously and expect you to do the same. And you can see the whole PLOS code of conduct for editorial board members linked here, and it is on our editor center, so you can read more about it. And I believe it was sent as part of the onboarding process as well. All right, so next, how do we get started in Editorial Manager? So you probably have the profile already on the Editorial Manager. So it is our submission system provided by a company called Aries. So when you started out as a new academic editor, like you would like to, you would need to like update your information, like email address, institution, because like that's how we contact you, right? So you want to make sure that you have the most updated content info on our profile. And then also, this is very important, you want to indicate your area of expertise. You can do that through your profile, like add classification and keywords, because that is how we find you. That is how we match you with the relevant manuscript as well. And then also you can set an available date, right? Like, so if you're going to be busy, right, like with external commitment or like, like maybe if you are like handling like PLOS manuscripts and you do want to kind of take a break, you can go to the system and then you can add an available date so that during that time, like we will not contact you, we will not send you invitation to handle manuscripts so that you can take a break. So we have a really good resource for how to do all that and then some, right? Like there are some tips on how to navigate the editorial manager, and like it is linked here. I already opened it here. So they are more like resources if you're interested in, learning more about it. Yeah, like there are some tips and tricks here. All right. So next, life of a manuscript. So like, like I just want to let you know like how the manuscript go from like submission to publication. Like what does it go through, right? Like at PLOS. So when the author submit the manuscript, it go through something called initial technical check. So like at that stage, we check like technical things like formatting or like image visibility or metadata, right? And only if the manuscript passed this check, it go to next stage called subscan, which is short for submission scanning. So like that is where like step editor like Joanna will come in and then look at the manuscript, like, and then they will check many things like such as scope, like if the manuscript is in the scope, like if the manuscript is according to our publication criteria or ethics, and then if they are not according to any of them, like these manuscript can get rejected. So only if the manuscript passed the subscan, only if it looked good, right? Like it will pass to you, like academic editor. We're gonna send invitation to you to handle the manuscripts, right? And at the stage, you can, like either like accept or decline, like based on your availability or like relevant expertise. And then if you choose to accept the manuscript, then at this stage, you can evaluate whether this manuscript is suitable for peer review, right? And then if you think the manuscript is not suitable for peer review, you can reject at this stage as well, right? And then if you think it is suitable for peer review, you will send it out, like inviting reviewers. And then when you get the reviewers, then, like you will evaluate their comments, you will submit the decision. And then when you submit the decision, we're gonna go through another technical check to make sure everything looks good for sending the decision to the author, right? And then, like you can either like reject, revise, or accept, right? And if it is reject, then the life of a manuscript ends there. But if it is revision, then like the author will look at your like comments, and then they will submit the revised manuscript. And then we're gonna perform another technical check at this point. And if it passes, then like, the circle continue. We'll give it back to you, and then you will like do another revision round, right? And then once you decide that the manuscript is suitable for publication, then you will issue accept decision. And at that point, we're gonna perform final technical check, make sure everything looks good before passing it to the production, and then it will get published. All right, so what does how do you get invitation to handle manuscript, right? So these invitation gonna come to your email. That is why it is really important for you to have the most updated content info, because that's where you're gonna receive all these invitation. And then most of them are sent by an algorithm, like the matching algorithm that will match you with the paper. So like, so in PLOS One and GPH, the Global Public Health. But for other journals like climate, mental health, and water, we will be using term-based matching, which is like classification and keywords. So that is why it's really important for you to update, like your profile, right? Like with your expertise and content information, because that is how we send invite to handle manuscript to you. And then we want you to have really good experience, like, getting like relevant manuscripts. And then at this stage, right, like you always have the choice to accept or decline the invitation. Um, like if you are too busy, or like if you don't think this paper is relevant to you, or like if you have conflict or interest to the author of the manuscript, you can decline it. And if you think you have the time to handle the manuscript from start to finish, you can accept the manuscript invitation. And then again, we have another good resource to, like talk about all of that, and then some like good tips. So here, there's a quick guide called Invitation to Handle Manuscripts. And I'm gonna go through it really fast, like what is in there. So, so this is what the invitation email gonna look like, right? Like you can go through it and see, like what each session means. And then if you're curious to learn more about like our matching algorithm, you can read more here too. And also, like we will like there's like a tip on like when you might want to consider accepting the invitation and when you might want to consider declining the invitation. So like I said, like time and relevant expertise, and if you don't have competing interests, and then there's a link on, how we define competing interests here, then you may consider accepting the invitation. And if not, like you can consider declining the invitation. And also we have like a, FAQ from academic editor. So if you have like any questions, you can look at it. And then if you have more questions, you can ask us later. Okay, so what is the peer review timeline look like? So this is the guideline on, like our expectation, I guess, on how much each stage of the peer review take. But we understand like it will really depend on the manuscript or subject area. So it might be, like it's like a estimation of the timeline. So once you accept to handle the manuscript, you will go through initial evaluation. So at this stage, right, like you will consider whether you want to send this out to peer review or not. And then it should take approximately 3 days. And then once you think it's suitable for peer review, you're going to start finding and securing reviewer. And then this should take about 1 to 2 weeks. And then once you secure the reviewer, right, like the reviewer will have like 2 to 3 weeks to evaluate the manuscripts and write feedback. And then when you get back these feedback, you have 3 days to make the editorial decision. And then, the cycle continue like with each revision cycle. Yeah, okay. Here I will stop sharing the screen and pass it to Joanna, who's gonna talk more on the editorial side.
Just get the screen so I can see you all again. Okay. Can you see my slides? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit now about a bit more in depth about handling the manuscript and how you might go about that. So as Shen said, once you've accepted to handle the manuscript, the first thing we ask you to do is to do your own initial evaluation. And at this point, the first thing would be to assess it against the PLOS publication criteria, which is on the website for all the journals, and are very broadly consistent with one another within one and the mega journals. One of the misinterpretations, perhaps, of our first criteria is that when we're asking for original research, that does not mean that we have any expectation on the novelty of that research. So please do not reject for novelty or with any English language concerns, because English language can be addressed through kind of asking the authors perhaps to get a proofreader or a native English speaker to polish that. And it's not a requirement on PLOS One for the research to have high impact. It just needs to be its own contribution. So that's one of the main kind of misinterpretations of that first criteria that as academic editors you might come across. Within your kind of invitation, when you've accepted it, there may be information from a staff editor left within that letter. And that's really important for you to take a look at, because in those early stages, we've assessed the manuscript for various things kind of that might align with our policies and guidelines that we want to draw your attention to, and that we might want your expertise to kind of look in on. So this might be that we think a manuscript might attract a lot of media attention. So we want to really make sure that the review process goes really well, that there's a kind of an in-depth look at it. It might be, for example, something that I see a lot on the physical sciences is that authors might be developing a new model or a new application, a new method of some sort, and there we have a requirement that that's properly validated. So there might be a message from us saying, can you check that this meets our validation guidelines? So it's really important to kind of have a look there. And also you can kind of draw on your own expertise here. You are the expert in these areas. So if there's anything that you think it means that this is not worth going out to peer review, and the authors need to do some substantial changes to it before it would be ready, you can reject at this point. Just make sure that in your rejection letter, you clearly say why. And again, relate that to the publication criteria when you send that. So there is a guide there as well to kind of help you with this initial evaluation. It kind of points to the criteria. So quite commonly, it will be this first one that perhaps is not original research, it's not a clear research question. Or often we'll see that it's something kind of methodological that is that you might notice that it's quite problematic and needs to be revisited. But yeah, if you think that all these are fine and that it's ready to go for peer review, then you'll start looking for reviewers. And so this probably generates quite a lot of questions when it comes to kind of looking for reviewers. The most important thing is that you're inviting reviewers who have the right expertise for the paper that you're handling. And this might be not just in the subject matter, but in the methods that they're using as well. So sometimes you might want to look and then invite reviewers with different lines of expertise to make sure you're covering kind of the whole breadth of the manuscript. It's really important that you try and avoid any potential conflict of interests. And there is kind of advice to help you with this, but the general rule of thumb would be that the reviewers and yourself shouldn't have published with the authors of the manuscript within the last 5 years. And when you're inviting reviewers, try and avoid inviting anyone from the same institute as the authors, because they're quite likely to have a conflict of interest there. So yeah, really look out for that. Securing reviewers can sometimes be challenging. Everyone's very busy. And in some subject areas can have a bit more of a problem with this than others. And there's lots of kind of tips to kind of help you with that. So early career researchers tend to have a little bit more time. They might be able to take on a greater number of kind of review requests, perhaps the more senior academics. When you're looking for reviewers, you can use kind of the Web of Science tool to kind of give you some suggestions on who might fit. Always check though, just by looking perhaps at some of an individual's recent publications that are actually on topic and are going to be able to handle the work. So people are more likely to accept reviewing if they feel they've got real expertise in the area anyway, and offer you a good review that you can make a decision on. Thinking about people that you've met at conferences, and within some scope colleagues, although try not to invite people that you work closely with, because again, you might not be getting a broad selection of reviewers and therefore feedback. So try and get a spread of kind of geographic regions as well is really worthwhile. Because it can be challenging, we suggest that you kind of invite a group of reviewers, around 8 within the system to start with, and then you can also then have others set as alternate reviewers, and that way the system will automatically invite them an alternate reviewer if one declines. So it saves you having to keep coming back into Editorial Manager and inviting more people. You can kind of set that up and front load the work in that sense. Yeah, I guess the only other thing I would say here is that although there is a database within Editorial Manager, that's not really curated in any sort of way. So it's best to not rely on that when you're inviting reviewers. Yeah, so you've invited your reviewers, they've come back, and now you need to assess those reviews and make a decision. Sometimes reviewers won't agree, and that's fine. And sometimes you might not agree with the reviewer comments as well, and that's okay too. As academic editor, you have kind of the final say on what the decision will be. but the reviewers will give their recommendation. Just because both reviewers might recommend accept doesn't mean you have to accept the paper if you still think there's outstanding work that needs to be done. We would just ask that you make sure that in any revised decision letter, you explain what you want the authors to still address. And that's really important. Although there might be differences of opinion, or there might be things that you don't agree with that the reviewers have said, you should never edit the reviewer comments or delete them or change them in any way. Instead, in the body of your decision letter, you can guide the authors on what needs to be looked at. So you might say that reviewer 2 draws attention to X. I don't think this is necessary for you to address, and give you a reason, and then it can be up to the author to address that. Similarly, quite often you might see that reviewers have requested certain work to be cited within their review. And it can be really helpful for reviewers to give suggestions of work that might be helpful for the authors to look at, but it should never be a request that is compulsory for the authors to include in order to get an accept decision. So when you see recommended citations, just make sure in your decision letter you're reminding the author that they don't need to include those references, but they should take a look and kind of make their own assessment on whether they should be included or not. Because that's something that's quite common and it can be helpful, but yeah, it shouldn't be a requirement for the paper to kind of proceed. So yeah, there's guides here as well for you to have a look at. So I haven't got one open, but on kind of tips and things when you're assessing the reviews. At this stage, though, you might sometimes come up with some publication ethics queries. And we've got a guide there for things that you might spot and how you can kind of go about responding to them and bringing them to the journal office's attention. In the first case, it's probably the best place to go, and then we can help you guide you with that on a case-by-case basis. And so, of course, you've got several options when it comes to making your decision. So you can reject, you can issue either a minor or major revision, which will give the authors a timeline of, I think it's about 45 days to kind of prepare the manuscript, make their amendments and resubmit it. And then it will come back to you, and then you then, as Shen explained, make that decision on whether it needs to go out for review again or not. Or you can issue an accept. If you're issuing an accept decision, then the expectation is that no more changes need to be made to that manuscript. So if there's anything outstanding, it's much better for you to issue a minor revision at that stage rather than an accept, and get those little things like proofreading and all that sorted out before the accept decision, because it will make the rest of the process a lot more smooth for the authors, if nothing else. Okay. So this, I think, just takes you again to resources that we've both kind of been pointing you at along the way, and the journal contacts. I would say the website is your kind of best friend in handling all things that you'll need to come across, and there's lots of information on there. So I'll stop my share and hand back to Shen, who's leading the next bit, I think.
Yeah, thank you, Joanna. So yeah, with that, the informational portion of the presentation is over, and we will jump into Q&A. So there are like a few questions that you submitted with registration. So we're gonna answer that first, and then, like if you have any questions, like you can either put it in the chat or unmute yourself, and then we will take the question. So Joanna, would you like to take the first one? I'm gonna stop sharing the screen so that we can kind of see each other.
Yeah, so I think the first one was I have a concern about peer review quality as an author who has submitted a manuscript to PLOS Mental Health. And so, unfortunately, sometimes the peer review quality uh, isn't great. And so, as an academic editor, you might see reviewer comments come back that are very brief. There might just be a couple of lines long, or they might be very long but give really general advice, which isn't very helpful to the authors. So when you're seeing that as an academic editor, the first thing to do would be to kind of look at those reviews and decide whether there's enough there for you to be able to make a decision, but also whether there's enough there to help the authors improve their work. If there's not, then I would invite an additional reviewer. So we're always looking for at least one good external review to yourself, in addition to yourself, for a decision really to be made. So yeah, if you've invited and if you've got, say, a couple come back, they're not very good, I would invite another reviewer to try and get a good review to come back. If you have any pub ethics concerns, so something that occasionally comes up is that you might think that a reviewer has used an AI tool to generate their review, then you should contact the journal office, and someone will get back to you and help guide you through the next steps on how to handle the review process for that specific manuscript. And again, if you're continually struggling to get good reviewers, that's always an option as well, is to just get in touch and one of the staff editors will be able to kind of look into that manuscript and its history and hopefully guide you to a better outcome. Which I think kind of leads on to a lot of these questions were quite similar, I think, in nature to do with kind of the review process. So do you want me to just carry on? So the next one was I've had over 20 reviewers reject or not respond to review a manuscript. How do you get timely acceptances? So hopefully we've covered a little bit of that already in the slides with some of our tips on how to invite reviewers and where you're more likely to get a timely response. But yeah, sometimes it's just really difficult and we can't get reviewers for a manuscript. If you get to the stage where it's been about 4 weeks and you're just not getting anyone and you've invited a good number of people, and you don't have any further suggestions about where you might find reviewers, then again, the answer is to contact the journal office. And again, we'll look through it on more of a case-by-case basis on how we might proceed with that. It might be that we know some people that might be good matches, particularly on some of the other smaller mega journals, like Climate and Water, or we just know other people in the pool who might be able to kind of have a look at it. And again, it's always worth remembering that not every paper needs to go out to peer review. So if you're looking at it as the academic editor, you can't get anyone to review it, and you have substantial concerns about the quality of the paper, or that it would need a lot of work to get it up to PLOS kind of standards, then you can reject that manuscript, and that would be a legitimate thing to do. Just only reject it if it's not meeting the criteria, not because you can't get reviewers.
I can take the next question, Joanna, if you want to take a little break. Okay.
Yeah, you go.
Yeah, okay. So the questions say, could you explain in more details the reviewer recommendation service? So please jump in if we are not understanding the question correctly, because we're just going off of like what is submitted. So I'm guessing that this mean what kind of tool, like what kind of services PLOS provide to assist you with the reviewer recommendation. And we do have a tool that might help you finding and securing reviewer, and it is called Web of Science Reviewer Locator Tool, and you can find that on your manuscript, like handling like editorial manager, right? Like so like there's a tool more like detail on the editorial manager guide, but like just briefly, right? Like you can click on that tool on that manuscript tab, and then like you can like they will provide you with a list of like suggested reviewer from the Web of Science database, and then like you can vet them, right? Like make sure that they have the relevant expertise, like good experience, right? And then like make sure that they don't have conflict of interest with the author before inviting them. So, and then like as Joanna covered, right? Like we do have like a guide on how to find and secure a reviewer, and then there are more tips on how you would do that. So yeah, like all the resources will be on the slide and on the resources page that Joanna mentioned. Should we take all the reviewer questions first? Is there any more reviewer questions? I see like some in the chat, but there's one submitted as well.
Yeah. So I think the other one was, what do I do if I can't find? Oh yeah. For papers with promise, how many rounds can we ask to revise before we terminate with the reject? So this is very much, I think, a case by case basis on how we would handle this. So it may be that the paper just isn't ready for the review process. And that's why it's kind of having all of these cycles of review, particularly if you're re-inviting the same reviewers and they're helping each round with further comments. And so if you wanted to, this is where we'd really rely on your expertise as academics and your judgment on the paper about whether it's going to reach an accept decision within a reasonable amount of time. So if there is going to be substantial changes needed to the manuscript to get it up to meeting the +1 criteria, that is going to realistically take the authors a good amount of time that's outside of that of a revised decision would usually be. So that's that around 45 days. Then it may be reasonable for you to issue a reject decision based on one of the +1 criteria or whichever journal you're on, because a substantial amount of work is required. So with those sorts of rejections, what you might like to say would be, at present, it's not meeting the PLOS criteria 4 and whichever criteria that is on. However, I think there's real promise in this work, but it needs substantial revision. Please consider resubmitting at a later date. And then that gives the authors the option to come back once they've done some of that work. And if they do resubmit, you may then be re-invited as the academic editor on that resubmission. So that's one avenue where you've got a paper with promise, but it's just not ready to go through the review process necessarily. The other thing you might want to consider is whether or not the authors are responding clearly and thoroughly to the reviewer comments. So if they're just ignoring the reviewer comments and that's why it keeps going back out for review, then you might decide that actually at this point a reject decision might be valid because you're not seeing the improvement needed to get it to that accept decision. And then again, it would be because there's still substantial outstanding concerns in relation to one of our criterion. It's quite normal for a paper to go through a few rounds of review. So when we're talking about how many rounds, this is when we're thinking that it's gone through like 4 or more rounds of review. At that point, we would start to get concerned that this manuscript's not making the improvements it needs. It's quite normal for it to go through a couple of rounds, and that wouldn't be of any concern. So hopefully this can be helped out a little bit by, as academic editors, you making sure that you're inviting reviewers that are really on topic. It also really helps if that when you agree to handle a paper, you really intend to commit to handling it through to the accept decision. Because if a manuscript's getting reassigned to lots of different academic editors, that usually then means that lots of different reviewers get invited. And that's where a manuscript's history can get a little bit complicated. And that can sometimes delay how many rounds of review it ends up having. So yeah, sticking with the paper from the start is really important to help minimize some of those kind of extra friction points in the process. And of course, if you're ever kind of in that situation and you're not sure what to do, then your answer is always just to contact the journal office, and a staff editor can then have a look at it themselves and work with you to work out what the next step should be. And that might be putting you in touch with another academic editor on the board for you to discuss what to do, particularly if it's a scientific concern more than a kind of a policy concern. So hopefully that kind of answers that question. Yeah.
Do you want to go to the next one about the reviewer? What to do if I cannot
what to
find a
do.
reviewer?
Yeah, what to do if you cannot find a reviewer. I think this is kind of circles back to some of the other things we've been talking about. So yeah, if you can't find a reviewer, then after about 4 weeks, then we would suggest you get in touch with the journal office, and we'll help you the best we can to kind of work out what to do next. Hopefully that's not something that you have to worry about too often, and you will get someone to help and review for you. But yeah, we're always on hand within the journal office to help where we can. So yeah. So I think that was the 3 submitted reviewer questions. Did you have any from the pre ones that you wanted to?
Yeah, so one more from the pre-submitted questions. I would like to learn more about how to optimize my use of the journal editorial websites. Again, I'm thinking that that means like the journal resource pages. And Joanna mentioned that we have resource pages for each journal that you can go to. And like you can find like all these quick guides that we mentioned in the presentation, and then we have like a few more on top of that, so you can just go there and then like try to find the relevant topic that you are looking for. Yeah, please chime in if I don't completely answer your questions. But Joanna, I'm gonna pass it back to you.
Yeah, just lost what the next question was. Hang on. There we go. Get the right page up. Yeah, and then that last one, which we had before, was how to navigate the editorial system conveniently and effectively. So again, there are guides on the within the editorial on the website to do with this. Perhaps it's easier if I just share my screen quickly and show where we're finding these guides. So you should be able to see the PLOS One website here, and you're going to find everything within this resources for editors tab under the publish kind of drop down. And there's an editorial manager kind of guide there. So that first link will take you to the actual submission portal. And then if you look through the guide, this will tell you how to do everything you should need to do. Everything, as we mentioned towards the start, will be communicated to you through email from editorial manager, and it will have the links to take you to the right place to action what you need to do. So it should hopefully be fairly straightforward. You'll have the link there on how to view the submission and to make your decisions. And yeah, again, if you ever get stuck, you just kind of drop us an email and we will help figure it out for you, particularly if there's any IT glitches. Okay.
Okay, I think that's everything for the submitted question, but we have a lot of good
Yeah.
questions on the chat. Um, a lot about reviewers. So would you like to take that, Joanna?
Yeah, that's fine. There's always lots of good questions about reviewers. So do you suggest using the classification matches for finding reviewers? Um, it can be a really good start if you haven't got anyone in mind from your own kind of um, expertise and people you meet and know within the field. Um, However, you should always then vet these people yourself. So just because someone topic might say that they're under machine learning is a really big field and they might not have the expertise to handle the specifics of the manuscript that you're handling. So it's good to then kind of look at their details that they've got within the kind of system and then look at some of their like recent publications. It's probably the best way to kind of assess that. So yeah, it can be helpful, but I wouldn't rely on it for finding reviewers. The Web of Science tool that was mentioned is a really good starting point, and also thinking about people that you know from your kind of day-to-day interactions within the research community on who might be good. Just avoiding those kind of potential conflict of interests areas. So I think that answers that question. The next one was also about reviewers. Can we input additional reviewers if we cannot find them on the searches? For example, if you know a great reviewer from an article but cannot find them in the searches. Yeah, absolutely. You can invite anyone to review. You do this through Editorial Manager. So when you're in the system, there's a button which is invite reviewers. And if you can't find that person already within our database, you can invite them. And then they will get the invite and be invited to then set up an account within EM to provide the feedback. But yeah, just because they're not within the Editorial Manager system now doesn't mean that they can't be added. So yeah, absolutely. If you know people who would be really good to review, you can still invite them.
Great. Sorry, Joanna, that was my question. I've had a really hard time trying to figure out to do that. Do you mind maybe dropping me an email telling me
Uh,
that? I would really appreciate it.
yeah, no, absolutely.
Thank
Let me
you.
just make a note of your name and I will drop you an
Okay,
email
thank
later.
you.
And
I must have spent like a couple of hours one day trying to figure this out. I don't know, maybe I'm just silly, but
no, so EM has its quirks, and once you know where things are, it's okay.
okay,
Yeah,
thank
it takes
you.
everyone a while, so please don't worry.
Thank you.
Okay, good question. So how should I communicate a rejection decision to the authors when two reviewers have provided positive but superficial or unconvincing reviews? And I believe the manuscript does not meet the journal standards. I'm concerned that authors may contest the decision given the apparent support from the reviewers. Yeah, this is a really good question. And sometimes it does happen where you are in the situation where you don't think a paper is suitable for publication, and that's absolutely fine. As academic editor, you have the final say, and we kind of fully trust your expertise and your decision-making ability. So when you're writing the decision letter, the decision letters will also be sent to those reviewers. So whatever you write, you should really stick to the publication criteria. That's kind of how all decisions should be made. So as long as you're sticking to that, you shouldn't have any problems. And kind of just be really clear. So if you've got superficial and unconvincing reviews, you may decide that you want another reviewer. That's an option to you. If you don't think it meets the standards, then all you need to say in your decision letter is why you're issuing that rejection. So it could simply be that you know that you don't believe that it's clearly showing a contribution to the basis scientific knowledge, and it hasn't got a clear research question or rationale. And therefore you're issuing the reject decision, and that's fine. Authors are always welcome to contest a decision. that won't come directly to you. That will come through the system, and it will be decided by a staff editor whether or not that decision was kind of correctly given at the time. So if you're rejecting because it doesn't meet the criteria and they appeal that decision and it comes to a staff editor and they think that the decision you took based on the criteria was correct at the time, then there's nothing really for you to worry about there. If we think that the appeal was valid, then it will go back out to review. And so that might mean that you get the manuscript back and you might get some guidance on how to handle it. It might be that it goes to another academic editor. But as long as you're making a decision based in line with the publication criteria, then there shouldn't be anything for you to worry about in terms of what happens next and whether the authors want to write back. That won't come to you, that should come to us, and we manage that process, and we'll have kind of extra checks on the manuscript at that stage. Okay, so the next one, in my experience, it could take considerable effort to peer review a paper. I understand the review can take up to 10 days. What is the flexibility of this deadline? How could I extend the time frame? Yeah, great question. So when a reviewer accepts to review, the standard kind of time frame we give them is 10 days. Obviously, as you say, some papers will take longer to review, people are busy. So the reviewers themselves can ask for an extension, and that's fine. And then someone from PLOS will kind of change that on their account. There is kind of a grace period of 6 days within the system, before which they'll just get terminated if they've not contacted us to say that, you know, they need extra time for whatever reason that might be. And I would have to double check, but I think you can change the number of days when you send the invites. We would just say don't extend it for a huge amount of time because you're going to slow the process down. But yeah, within reason, if you think actually perhaps 14 days is a more reasonable time frame, you could change that on the invite. If that's also perhaps helping you get reviewers if you're struggling a little bit, that's also an option. Lots of good reviewer questions here. Okay, so Priyanka, 2 small questions. How many reviewers are sufficient? Out of the 12 I invited, only 2 agreed to view. Should I provide my decision on their comments? Yeah. So the absolute minimum is that you have 1 external review that is detailed and of use to the authors, in addition to yourself. Remembering that you can always add comments to the decision letter with your own thoughts on a manuscript, and we really encourage you to add any feedback you might have. Just make sure it's clearly signed, that it's come from you as academic editor. Ideally, you'll have 2 sets, 2 people review it. 2 reviewers is kind of more ideal because you'll get a bit more breadth of comments for the authors. But yeah, 2 out of 12. If 2 have accepted, that's pretty good. So that would be absolutely fine to kind of make your decision once you've got those comments in, providing that they're kind of good standard reviews. Okay. And the other part of that question was 1 reviewer provided comments on the first week, but no other reviewer accepted. Waiting for 2 more to accept. It's probably going to take, it's okay to get delayed more than 2 to 3 weeks, you suggest for reviewers' feedback. Yeah, so I think as kind of Shen said when she was presenting those slides, that's kind of our guideline. That's what we would like kind of the process to look like. Sometimes it will take a little bit longer. Sometimes it might be quicker. What we would say is try not for it to take a really long time. And if you're not getting comments back, then perhaps it's that you want another reviewer to look at it instead. Again, if you've got 1 review and it's really good and you feel you can make a decision with your own comments, then that's okay. or perhaps out of those two, you're waiting for only one comes back, and then that gives you two to make a decision from. So, yeah, again, the rule being, as long as you've got one really good review and you feel you can make a decision, and there's comments there that are going to be helpful for the authors, then you can make that decision. But if there's a bit of a delay, a small delay is okay, that's going to happen. There's going to be flex within that timeline based on each manuscript's kind of journey through the system. Okay, coming up to time, but there's so many good questions.
So Joanna, I'm just gonna interject a little bit, so it's time, and then, please feel free to leave if you have any other commitment. But I just want to make sure, because we have like 2 AI questions that are sort of related. Do you want to take both at once?
The AI questions.
Oh yeah. Next question is about PLOS policy regarding the use of AI in review. And then there's another one down there talking about, like if there's any PLOS mechanism for checking reviewer comments to make sure that they are not AI generated.
Yeah. So AI, that's a really kind of new and evolving area. We don't have a tool to check for it yet, but hopefully one day we will. At the moment, we're relying on patterns and trends that we have noticed within PLOS. And so when you're handling reviews, you might notice that you think something's AI generated. If AI tools being used purely as kind of language revision, then and they have declared that, then that's okay. If you think you've got an AI-based review that's been AI generated, that's not going to be useful for the authors. It also has some concerns to do with the confidentiality of the manuscript at that point. So email the journal office when you have those concerns, and a staff editor will have a look at the review, and we'll kind of do our own investigation and make a judgment on what that review will, whether or not we think that review has been AI generated, and give you kind of tailored advice on how to handle the next steps of that manuscript. But the AI tool policy is on the website. And as I say, the general rule is that it should only be used kind of for language translation, and it should always be declared. And other uses don't really fall within that. So yeah, if you AI reviews, if you've got concerns about that, email in. Otherwise, yeah, so yeah, you can make a decision on one reviewer if it's a good quality review. Okay, and then there's a question there about having step-by-step help with Editorial Manager. Perhaps we take that one back to Dina Sheen and see what can be done with that question.
Yeah, absolutely. If you want like demo, or like if you want to shadow us, like walking through the editorial site, like please feel free to email us at support@plos.org, or any other, like the support need. I'm gonna drop that email in the chat, and then we are happy to set that up.
Yeah. And then when might they expect the recordings? I think that's the last question. So the recording should be fairly soon, I would have thought, Shin.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, I think that we are missing a couple questions. That's why I was kind of checking the chat. Yeah, so there's like a reviewer question again. Yeah, it's been weeks, and we still can't find 2 reviewers. Can we make decision based on our own judgment and one reviewer suggestions? I think you touched on it a little bit, but
yeah, absolutely. If that one reviewer is provided good feedback, then yeah, and you're able to make a decision, you can go ahead with that.
And that is PLOS One doing a check for plagiarism before sending the invitation to academic editors.
On plagiarism?
Yeah.
Okay, yes, so part of Subscan is that we do look for plagiarism through our Authenticate tool, and I believe that when you look in on Editorial Manager, you might see the results of that. However, when you're looking at the manuscript yourself, you might know that it sounds particularly similar to something that you've recently read, and you can highlight that to us as well. So it does look for plagiarism, but we're looking mainly at text overlap when we're checking for those things. But PLOS also doesn't publish anything that we consider kind of very derivative or kind of salami slicing. So this is when it's very slight tweaks to something and a manuscript's kind of been put together in that sense. And that is much harder to be determined through a tool. And so that's where kind of your expertise really plays into it as well. So if there is anything, if you ever have any concerns, always get in touch about anything like that. But yeah, we do a plagiarism check before it comes to you.
Okay, I think that's all the questions, right? Do you wanna, am I missing anything?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
so. But
Yes.
yeah.
All right, I'm gonna quickly close out the meeting. I know we are out of time, so we really appreciate your time being here. Okay. So the closing, right? Like please reach out to us anytime. You know, like please engage with us on social media. We're on Blue Sky, and then they are like handles, right? That you can click through this link. We are on LinkedIn, and as a editorial board member, remember that you are an ambassador for PLOS, right? Like you are the one who is shaping the content that we publish that is freely available for everyone around the world. So please help us by promoting and advocating for the journals. So if you're at a conference and you think, you know, like there's a study that might be suitable for PLOS, like you can recommend, right, like them to publish with us and so on. And then, you know, if you have any colleague or if you see anyone on conference that is suitable, that might be suitable for joining our editorial board, please send us a referral. We would love to have them. So yeah, I think that's it for the information portion. So there's a social time. So if you have any time, like please feel free to stay, and then we can, like, you know, based on how many people are there, like we can do breakout room. But if we don't have enough people, like we can just, you know, have like one giant like social time, I guess. Yeah. So I'm gonna stop sharing and I'm gonna stop the recording so you can be on the camera if you liked.